In the developing world, cities have swollen beyond their carrying capacity. With uncontrolled urbanization, Beijing, Shanghai, Delhi or Chennai are now in permanent water crisis. Priceless local water resource is not being conserved. China, with its explosive growth, is running on the fast lane for everything. Huge urbanization, new coal-fired power plants at the rate of one a week, big dams have all contributed in knocking down the environment, forests, water catchments, aquifers. Unfortunately, instead of preserving their natural resources, they've opted for more technology. According to Newsweek magazine, in August 2007, they put down an astronomical sum of $25 billion a year to recycle water. This figure has gone up many times since. Within 50 years from being water surplus, India and China are now getting into terminal water stress. Of course, populations are up, especially in India, where it has trebled.
I think that the main problems that we are having in Indian cities are that they are so large that they have stopped functioning properly. And the migration into the cities has been so enormous that the level of human suffering and the discomfort level for more than half the population of the city is not acceptable. I think that the patterns of development that we have adopted in order to industrialize ourselves need to be looked at again.
The chaotic evolution of cities in India have made them unsustainable. With the great urbanization upon us, we need a radical shift in how we conceive and understand our cities. Is there any natural principle on which we can base our cities that make them more sustainable? Can we build more natural cities? So Professor Soni, what's your idea of sustainable cities?
So let me go through the little story on this. You know, we were at a Dalai Lama meeting 2 years ago on cognition, on neuroscience and on traditional Hindu practices of meditation. And I was just looking and hearing what people are doing. They do a lot of experiments with all kinds of brain waves and they look at states of the mind and what is happening. It was a little clinical. And when you look at these things, or the state of the union, it's actually body, mind and spirit at any time for a human being. And for any living organism, actually, one of the things that we know is that any organic living being, it doesn't matter whether it's a plant, a tree, a cockroach or we, actually keeps all its parameters steady, like its body temperature, like its pressure, like the trace elements, like the plasma. And if anything goes a little bit off balance, like for your temperature, if it goes up by 2 degrees or down by 2 degrees, you're sick. Now, what does the body do actually? We have a certain energy input, which is just food. And the rest the body does. It keeps you cool. You know, it keeps you cool by evaporation in the summer like now. This is called homeostasis. But the interesting thing is the planet does the same thing. Because when you look at the planet, it's getting a little bit of energy from the sun, the solar constant, like today it's a bit heavy. And the planet maintains the atmosphere at 79% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and small fractions of other gases, argon, carbon dioxide, and so on. It maintains the salt level in the seawater at a constant level by throwing out salt in evaporite basins. It does a whole slew of things, much more. And it's actually even more interesting as an organism because whatever we eat, we have to throw out every day and we put it on the planet. But the planet doesn't have anywhere to put its waste. So it has to recycle its waste by having natural cycles.
Right.
But it maintains its steady state. Okay, now these are two examples on two widely different scales. From the microscopic to our scale all the way to the planet. Why should a city not be like that?
Even groundwater has depleted to alarming levels as a result of India's celebrated Green Revolution. But if natural wisdom prevails, there is a whisper of a chance to recover this in 40 years. But only if the agricultural map of the country is redrawn and new strategies adopted to use water in a sustainable way. The only way out is to find a new source of water and to protect it. The river Ganga and its tributaries come down the Himalayas into the plains of North India. They've been flowing for millions of years, overrunning the banks during the monsoon, swollen with water and depositing sand on the floodplain. The sandy layer on top can be from 50 meters to even 300 meters deep. That's a lot. The Yamuna River floodplain in Delhi is a sandbank which is about 5 kilometers wide and on average about 50 meters deep. Sand and gravel are great for water storage, and so it is no surprise that along the river 1 kilometer of floodplain holds a lot of water, about 80 million cubic meters. Can we use this? Hydrology tells us that we may pull out over a third of this, nearly 25 million cubic meters. That is enough for 250,000 people. This looks too easy, so we need some caution here. The question is, if we pull out all the water from the floodplain, how will we recharge the water? The floodplain is an extensive aquifer that runs the whole length of the river, even over thousands of kilometers. If we take out the water locally for the city, the rest of the floodplain will recharge it by gravity. This has been seen to be so from the hydrographs of the floodplain. Experiments on local withdrawal of water show that if there was no recharge, groundwater levels would fall by 10 meters, whereas actually in the floodplain it drops by only 2 meters. This means that for a floodplain, an area 5 times the local area where the water is being pulled out is recharging it. At the end of the day, if we pull out only so much water as is naturally recharged by the rain and the monsoon floods, we can pull out about 3 million cubic meters for every kilometer of river course. During the monsoon, the rains in the swollen river can bring back the water levels back to the brim each year. In India, the monsoon still brings down a lot of water downriver, from July to September. If we pull out extra water, then we can easily arrange for an extra recharge by running a bit of monsoon water upstream through shallow channels that run along the embankment. Let the water drain over the floodplain till the sand below saturates. This can take care of the water needs of over 1 million people in the city. It is actually happening in Delhi. This is a novel solution for city water. It is non-invasive and perennial. With the great urbanization breathing down the developing world, it is predicted that cities will be mushrooming. How will we handle this? The river floodplains are still intact and possibly the only source of water on the horizon. We have found that a new urban civilization of 1 million people can be watered by about 30 to 40 kilometers of river course. This may be the way to go. How can cities be self-sustaining and not prey upon their environment? Like Delhi, which has developed a huge water footprint over the last decade. It gets its water from the Tehri Dam 250 kilometers away in the northern Himalaya. This led us to think of cities in a different way. So we decided to give a blueprint for a natural or an organic city. What do we mean by organic?
As a physicist, I really enjoyed working out the order of magnitude estimates for reducing ambient temperatures by convection from the green areas in this chessboard pattern and from the river. This gives us great savings in energy. And as you will see, to make a city of 1 million people self-sustaining in vegetables and milk, and also to simultaneously greatly improve transport, pollution and health. And that is why we feel that future cities should actually aspire to have a much better sustainability index, otherwise they won't last.
We have already discovered that spanning from the small scale of a living being to the encompassing scale of the living planet, life is self-sustaining and maintains a steady state. So maybe this could be the organizing principle at the intermediate scale of a living city. The first imperative is a perennial water supply. This can happen by locating the city by the river floodplains, leaving a 3 kilometer wide floodplain across a river length of 15 kilometers. leaving the river floodplain fallow for 10 kilometers upstream and downstream from the city. Set the city to a 15 kilometer by 15 kilometer square chessboard pattern with the white squares as the built areas and the green squares as the green areas, which could be the parkland, vegetable gardens or pasture land. The 3 kilometer wide floodplain that runs from 15 kilometers along the river will have to be protected and used only for growing organic vegetables.
Well, in the chessboard pattern, let me explain, is a diagram. The diagram which says in principle the city of the future has to have urban agriculture in it. Now, urban agriculture, which we've shown diagrammatically as being alternate squares, in real fact, when you build the city on the ground, will consist of parks and other kind of open spaces, where we feel that food cultivation is of prime importance. The reason for that is that the price of food in urban cities like Delhi today is 3 times, we did a survey, the price of food in Delhi is 3 times what it is in the areas where it's grown. And I think that we have to shift our thinking on food production, and therefore the checkerboard pattern essentially has at its logical end the fact that we need to mix agricultural production and urban living.
Of the green area in the city, we will use a third for parkland, a third for vegetable gardens and a third for pasture for cows. This will make the city self-sufficient in vegetables and milk. In the summer months in India, the built-up areas get very hot, over 45 degrees Celsius. The hot air will rise, pulling in the cool air from the green areas, green convection. The city also pulls in cool air from the river, blue convection, adding insulated hollow brick walls, housing and reflecting roof and solar panels. All these can bring down the ambient temperatures by 7 to 10 degrees Celsius during the hot summer, saving much energy that would have gone to air conditioning. Now the city is so designed that cycle paths will run along the green diagonals and be non-stop, all less than 7 to 8 kilometers from the city center. This will make it easy, and the shady bicycle ride, which will be shorter in time than driving and parking, encouraging people not to use cars. Such small traverses and non-hydrocarbon pathways will cut transport costs. Add the open green nature of the city will reduce pollution by a factor of 8 with a similar improvement in the health index. The city will cut down substantially on energy costs for transportation and the transport of produce and on energy for cooling. We find that factoring in all costs, including cheaper rentals, the cost of living will diminish to a third of that of a big city. Taking all these parameters into account, we developed a sustainability index for the natural city to find that whereas Delhi's sustainability index is less than 10%, that of the natural city is close to 80%. River cities are the most prevalent cities in the world, and that is why this template has been chosen. Is it not crazy to recycle water with more technology and dispense more waste in the environment with costs of over 1.5 billion a year, rather than have a natural and perennial source of water that does the same practically for free? The floodplain, which were earlier embanked to prevent flood damage, have changed identity into an immense water resource in times of water scarcity. Such are the non-invasive benefits of an evolutionary resource.